In this episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast, we're going to be talking about how to do photography, how to really start your own side business and turn it into a full-time thing, health and fitness. We're going to be talking about traveling, basically everything that everyone listening to this show loves. And right now I got Fat Tony. That's I'm not trying to make fun of him here. That's what he calls himself, Fat Tony. I got Tony here. And first off, Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, we neglected this part of the conversation before we started recording. But my nickname is Fat Tony. My real name is actually not Tony. So everybody just calls me Fat. So yeah, Fat Tony is a nickname that I got when I was 15 years old because my friends thought that Adam Taylor was too much of a dorky white kid name. And they thought that a tough mafia name would be much cooler. So they picked that name and it stuck around. But yeah, everybody just calls me Fat.
All right. That seems kind of weird for someone that doesn't know you just to get, hey, Fat, you know what I mean?
But, yeah, it is weird at first, I think, for a lot of people, but it becomes more normal. And what's funny, too, is that it's like totally normal for me. And I forget that it's like weird for people sometimes because, you know, I'm 34 now and it's been more than half my life that people have been calling me that. And that's just like my identity at this point, you know?
Well, in that case, Fat, tell us, how did you get to where you are today? I mean, I think what you're doing right now with all the traveling, in the short version for the listeners, I'm going to let you tell the long version, is you're traveling around the world on your honeymoon. So what led up to this point? And you can take as long as you want.
Yeah, so much stuff. So like you said, right now I'm on a 3.5-month journey around the world with my wife. We actually originally planned to do 6.5 months, and we left the day after we got married. But we found out she was pregnant after we started planning the trip. So we had to cut the trip short. So we're getting a couple of prenatal doctor visits in on this trip in different countries. And we're a month in and it's going great. We're in Thailand right now. I'm currently sitting inside a hotel in Chiang Mai. And this afternoon, after I get off the podcast with you, we're going to go to this vegan yoga meetup thing that we read about online. But leading up to this, let's see. For me, it all started with setting goals. I knew that I was interested in photography when I was really young. Like I got interested or kind of introduced to it on a 5th grade family vacation to New York City. And ever since then, I said I wanted to be a photographer. And then while I was in high school, I was on the yearbook staff and I was super into BMX bike riding at the time. And on the yearbook staff, I shot pictures and I laid out the pages and stuff. And I just thought to myself, if I could do this for a BMX magazine, that would be the coolest job in the world. So as a 17-year-old high school senior, I set a goal of working at a BMX magazine. And with that goal in mind, it was kind of the only thing I thought about as I went through college. I ended up getting a degree in graphic design because I thought I wanted to lay out magazine pages. But I also had that interest in photography. And it's funny because I didn't realize at the time that the photographer and the designer at a magazine was two completely different jobs. So I really was naive going into it. But later on through college, I realized that it was very different jobs. And the designer sits at a computer all day and the photographer travels around the world and does a bunch of cool stuff. So I started shifting my focus towards photography at the end of college. And just by virtue of setting that goal and working, for 4.5 years towards that goal, a month before I graduated college, I got a call from the editor of Ride BMX magazine asking if I wanted a job there. So right out of college, I literally had my dream job waiting for me in California. So I moved from my small hometown in Louisiana to Southern California and started at my dream job. I worked there for 5.5 years as the online editor for the magazine. So that meant that I got to do photography, event coverage. I ended up, as the internet progressed and video came into play, I had to learn how to film and edit videos. I wrote articles, did interviews, and just created all the content for this BMX magazine's website. While I was doing that, they were also sending me all over the world to cover events and go on trips and stuff with different riders. So I got bit by the travel bug during that time. And about 5.5 years in, I decided it was time to break off and just do my own thing because, by traveling so much, I'd gotten a taste for it and I just wanted more. And this interesting thing happened where I was hanging out with all these professional BMX riders that didn't have jobs. And even though I had like the coolest job in the world, it was still a job. And, I still had to go to an office oftentimes and, I had a lot of work to do at the computer. And I was like, man, I want a lifestyle more like my friends that are all pro riders, So I quit the full-time job to have a freelance life, which allowed me to travel a lot more on my own terms and just continue pursuing my passions.
That is awesome. So I want to dig in more into how you became successful at photography. So I guess at what point let's talk a little bit about the first dollar you ever made with photography, and let's dig in a little bit deeper on how that came about.
Sure. So, man, this is thinking back now more than, 10 years or whatever. So it's a little hard. So it started out when I was in college. I knew I wanted to work for that magazine. So I actually just started submitting photos to them. I had, kind of networked enough in the industry to get connected with the editors of the magazine. And they sort of taught me how to submit stuff, but nothing got accepted. So I never got a photo published and printed and never got paid for a photo. But at the time, their website was really lacking. And so I started just giving them photos for free that they could put on their website. And so that was kind of like my big foot in the door with them and within the industry. And then after I got more experience and, just kept submitting, the first thing I ever got printed in a magazine was this road trip I went on. I had a bunch of friends that all took a trip riding bikes, and I shot photos, and I wrote an article, and I sent 3 magazines the same article and the same set of photos. But here's the difference, I think. Most people, when they submit photos, they send an email, and they might include attachments or whatever. I actually printed out the article, printed out all the photos on 8x10 size paper, and snail mailed all of them, including a CD with everything in the digital format, so that it was really hard for the editors to say no. You know what I mean? I basically put a finished piece in their hands, and put the photos in their hands so that they had to look at them and could be kind of wowed by them. Instead of seeing another photo on their screen, they were actually holding, these 10 photographs or whatever. And so that was how I submitted my first article that got printed. It actually got printed in a BMX magazine in the UK. So that was the first time I made $1 from any kind of publication or any photos or anything. And then shortly after that is when I graduated college, and I was just looking for any way to get published, to make money or whatever. And there was one guy locally in my area that was a professional rider, the only professional rider within several hours distance or anything. I had briefly met him once or twice, but we weren't really friends or anything. And I called him up one day, just kind of cold called him and said, "Hey man, I'm a photographer, looking to get my name out there more and looking to do more work. I recently got one article published. I'm trying to get another one. Can we meet up and shoot some photos, and I can do an interview with you and submit it to a magazine?" And he was basically like, "Yeah, I'm a full-time writer. This is my whole job and career is to get featured and published. So let's do it." So we met up and brainstormed a little bit and came up with some really cool photo ideas. We shot for 10 days straight. We became best friends. He was recently the best man at my wedding. And that article got published as well. And that's kind of the first article that put me on the map. And then through him, the other way you can make money from photographing in BMX or many industries is through the sponsors and advertisements and endorsements and stuff. So this guy rode for Red Bull. His name is Terry Adams. If anybody wants to look him up, at Terry Adams BMX on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. He rides for Red Bull and a handful of other companies at the time. And I was able to just go out and shoot random photos with him and then sell them to his sponsors. And I worked with him directly to kind of be the third party connection between me and the sponsors. So, he would say, "Hey, Red Bull, I have this photographer friend of mine that shot some photos. I want you to take a look at him." And so he was kind of the middleman there, helping me get in contact and helping me make some money.
There is a lot of really interesting things about that entire story. I mean, one of the things, just to kind of go over, is the idea of doing something for free. I've heard this again and again from my podcast guests. Is like, oh, the way I made my first dollars, I actually did something for free and then and went and made money. And also the other thing I thought was really interesting about your story is how much that this one little thing, you're like, "Hey, can we take some photos?" That turned into a guy actually being the best man at your wedding, ended up leading to a bunch of other jobs. Yep. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah, you never know where things are going to come from. And as far as the free stuff, this is a touchy subject, especially in photography, because when you give away work for free, you devalue your work and every other person's work out there that's trying to make a living from it. So I don't recommend that people, quote unquote, give away free work. But what I do recommend is having a strategic game plan for how you can make connections and how you can network with people and how you can turn that quote unquote free work into paying work. And I'll give you another story of a time more recently when I did that, because after so many years of working in the BMX industry, I actually kind of lost the passion for that sport and that lifestyle in that industry. And that's when I found health and fitness and started doing CrossFit and got really, really passionate about that. And so I was trying to transition from the BMX industry into the CrossFit industry. Skill is great, but you also have to have the connections. So my very first gig in the CrossFit industry, I saw on Facebook that one of the larger companies that produces supplements and protein and stuff was looking for a photographer for a pretty big event. I reached out to them, showed them my work, my portfolio, kind of gave them a list of my credentials, and they wrote back and said they'd love for me to shoot the event, but it was unpaid, and it was 3 days, and it was like 100 miles away from my house, which meant I had to drive 200 miles every day for 3 days without getting paid, which is a huge pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So I instead of continuing email correspondence, I got on the phone with them, and I was just very upfront. I was like, hey, I normally do not work for free. I'm a professional with, at the time, I think 7 or 8 years experience. And, this is not how I roll, but I want to build a relationship with you and I want to work for you in the future. And if you think there's, potential for me to shoot the next big event, which at the time would have been the CrossFit Games, if you think there's potential to shoot that for you and get paid and build a relationship, then I'm willing to do this for you. And I kind of their expectations, because again, I didn't want to devalue my work. Like, they wanted me to just give them all the photos from the entire event for free. And I said, I'll give you, like, I think it might have been 40 photos per day or something, for free. And he understood and was, respected my position and basically said, yes, there is potential to shoot in the future. So I shot the event. I ended up shooting the CrossFit Games for them and got paid for that. And over the next couple years, they were one of my biggest clients. And last year, out of all the clients, they were one of my highest paying for the last couple years, actually. So, having a plan in place and having a reason for giving away that work is super important if you're going to do that.
So let's dig in a little bit. If someone wanted to learn photography, for instance, I'd love to learn some of the skills of photography, maybe even turn it into a side business. Realistically, it probably wouldn't be as much for the money as it would be just it's fun to learn a new skill. But either way, let's say someone wants to learn photography. How do you recommend them getting started? Like, what's the first book? What's the first course or whatever?
That's a good question, because obviously I learned a long time ago and so much has changed since then.
Right.
And nowadays, the digital SLR cameras are all pretty freaking good. Like, you can get an entry-level camera that's probably better than my first professional level camera. You know what I mean? Just because the technology changes so fast, and every time a new camera comes out, the next one's cheaper and better. And so getting a decent camera. Obviously, there's so much information online, whether it be websites, YouTube videos, or whatever. But man, tough question to answer. I think finding someone to kind of take you under their wing would be a great start. There's nothing better than hands-on, I think. And whether that be a friend or a mentor or a class where you're paying somebody to teach you the basics. I think that's the best way to start, is hands-on and with somebody that knows and can show you the ropes, and somebody that knows your specific goals too, because shooting a wedding is different than shooting BMX, which is different than shooting real estate or art you want to shoot as well. Finding someone in that area. When I started shooting the BMX stuff and I got connected with the editors of that magazine that I wanted to work for, I would send them questions via email and they were nice enough to answer them for me. So I was literally learning from the pros that I wanted to, work side by side with, and they were willing to help me out. So not to take a too harsh of a turn, but, asking experts in the field is never a bad idea, and they might not reply, but, I think you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to, give you advice and time if you're, respectful and ask the right questions and stuff.
So when you first were learning, did you just contact an expert right away, or did you learn? Yeah.
I just kind of started trying it, honestly. And I think I always had an eye for composition. And at the time, I was in school for graphic design, which obviously teaches you a lot about composition and, different visual qualities and stuff. Um, but then I also ended up taking two, basic black and white photo classes, which also taught me kind of some of the fundamentals of photography. But once I started actually shooting BMX, I guess it was studying the pictures in the magazine and trying to recreate what I saw, whether it be the angles or the timing of the tricks. So yeah, just copying the experts as well, I think is important. And, looking at a picture and trying to analyze, like, why is this picture good? What draws me into it? Is it, because it's just a crazy trick, or is it because of the angle? Is it the lighting? Is it the timing? Asking yourself what works and what doesn't work in a photo can help you decide how you want to create your own photo.
I think that's actually really wise what you said there about just looking at other people's work and kind of copying it. I mean, the first website I ever put up, I just looked at some of my competitors and I said, yeah, I like that one. I'm going to make it look like that. And then over time, I kind of tweaked it. But to be honest, it's still pretty similar. And I think,
Sure. And,
yeah.
and at the same time, while you're copying somebody, you're going to be learning. If you try to recreate a technique, you're going to stumble upon three other techniques along the way that you'll use later on.
Absolutely. So then going from there, how did you, so you talked about one of the ways you got one of your clients. What else did you do to get new clients in photography? Because that seems tough.
Yeah. And in BMX, it was all about the athletes and their sponsors. So, that's a very specific and niche industry. So this might not have a lot of crossover to other places, but it was working directly with the people. Like I said, my friend rode for Red Bull, and so that was the connection in. Once you make more friends that have more sponsors, that's your connection in. I've also done a lot of just cold emails, Let's see. Okay, I'll switch gears here for you because I'm trying to give, your listeners kind of more actionable advice and stuff, and not something so specific to BMX or whatever. So there was a time when I was, transitioning out of the BMX industry where I was trying to figure out, what am I going to shoot next? Like, how am I going to keep creating my lifestyle with my photography without shooting BMX? And one of the things I did was real estate photography. So I actually set up a whole new website just for that. Keep in mind, I had never shot real estate before, and I didn't know how to get a real estate photo client. So what I did was reached out to the one local real estate agent that I knew. She was a friend of mine that used to be a former employee, a coworker, and she was a real estate agent. I bought her lunch and said, when you're looking for a photographer to list your property, what are you looking for? What can I do to be of service to someone like yourself? And she kind of laid it out of just, have a good website, have good photos on there, offer decent pricing, and be readily available. So I took notes on everything she said. I created a website, and my little About Me page on the website was exactly like almost word for word of what she said she was looking for in a photographer. She said she wanted somebody quick and reliable. So I, promoted my quick turnaround times and how readily available I am at a last minute's notice and those kind of things.
Right.
From there, I literally rode my bike around town and shot the outside of nice houses. Luckily, I live in a place, Southern California. I live in Long Beach. So LA and Orange County is right by me. I just rode my bike around and took pictures of the outside of houses that were nice to start up a little portfolio. I drove down to Laguna Beach and shot some exteriors and some kind of scenic views. And then I posted on Facebook that I was looking for nice houses to shoot the inside of, because obviously you need interior shots for your portfolio. One friend said that he knew a guy that makes custom cabinetry in homes. So I hit him up and asked to go shoot some of the cabinets that he was putting in houses. And I had just enough photos to make a website. And once I had just enough, I literally spent hours and hours combing through local real estate websites where I basically was like, okay, if I was going to buy a $5 million house in Long Beach, where would I look? I looked for a house like that and saw, okay, which website is listing that for sale? Which real estate agents are listed on that website? And I collected probably 400 emails just by doing that. I probably could have paid a virtual assistant to do it.
I was going to say, yeah.
But I hadn't experimented with VAs at the time. I have since done so and had good results, but I digress. So I came up with like 400 emails, and just blasted them all out of like, hey, I'm a photographer looking to shoot houses. Here's my work, and I got a couple of bites, and that's how I got my first couple of clients doing that.
I love that. There's so many good things there. One of the things that I completely agree with is just going out and emailing people. I think so many people have this fear of just doing it, just getting those emails
Sure.
and sending them out.
And I think one thing to be said with that is you really have to be a good communicator. And you have to put yourself in the position of the people receiving the email, and think what's going to make them say yes,
Right.
say no. Like you have to make it so easy for them, and I think I became better at this because I worked at the BMX magazine, and I was the person on the receiving end of these emails. I was the content director of the website where people wanted to post their products and their press releases and their videos. And so they would submit them to me, and there were certain people that gave me something that was very, very easy to copy and paste. And it was like, well, I wouldn't say no when you send out these emails is being an effective communicator. You have to put yourself in shoes and understand their perspective and understand no work and a no-brainer to say yes to. So I think the better you can communicate and the better you can understand the position of the people you're reaching out to, the more success you're going to have.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I've been sending out a lot of emails actually recently, and it's funny because I've actually, at one point I called my mom up. I'm like, hey, let me read this email to you. How does this sound? And sometimes just saying it out loud and saying what you typed out to another person really helps you think about, is this off? Does this sound weird? And it almost always does, in my opinion. There's something that can be improved,
I totally understand it. Yeah, I think getting an outside opinion is really helpful too, especially because in your head you already know what you're trying to say,
Right.
and you don't always know if you've communicated effectively. But having a third party like your mom or whoever.
The next thing I wanted to talk about was the traveling. So the other thing I think you're doing right now that's really interesting is basically traveling around the world. And I think you said it was going to be 6 months, but now it's going to be about 3 months. Tell us about that trip. Where'd you start and where are you going to?
Yeah, crazy trip. So here's how it began. My wife and I, fiance at the time, booked a honeymoon for 2 weeks to Bali. At the time, she had a full-time job, so we just booked, the flight to and from Bali, and it was going to be 2 weeks. We were super excited, and then like a week after we booked it, she actually got let go from her full-time job, and we started looking at like, well, should we extend it and stay there for 3 weeks? Should we stay for 4 weeks? And then we kind of kept talking about it, and then we're like, well, why not just stay for like 6 months? Like, what do we need to come back home for?
Yeah.
We kicked around the idea, and every time we mentioned it, we were just like, oh, we can't do that because of this. Like, we got the dog, we got the house, we got the cars, like all these different things. And I mentioned it to a couple of close friends of mine, actually the same guy, Terry Adams, the BMX rider that was my best man, him and another friend, and both of them were like, dude, you're just making up excuses. Like, you can totally do this, And one thing that really made it set in was he said, you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And he had told me about how his wife's dad had really recently passed away. Also, my mom, when I mentioned the idea to her, she mentioned how she had ever had a liver transplant, and her boyfriend was like, getting pretty old, and they don't know how long they're going to be able to travel. And it really just made me think, like, we have the opportunity, and you're not guaranteed tomorrow, and we just need to do this. So long story short, we decided, like, let's just jump all in and go for like 6 months. So that was the plan. Like I said, we later found out, like 2 months after we started planning, we found out that she was pregnant. So we ended up cutting the trip shorter. So we got married on December 11th, 2016, and we left for Bali the next day. And we stayed in Bali for 3 weeks. Now this is wrapping up our second week in Thailand. After another almost 2 weeks in Thailand, we're going to Vietnam for about 2 weeks, and then we're going to fly over to Europe because her family is actually from Poland. So we want to see her grandmother and uncle and cousins and stuff. So we found a flight from Vietnam to Italy. That was like the cheapest flight from Asia to Europe, basically. From Italy, we're going to kind of take a train up through the country, and then we'll leave from there to go to Poland. I think we're probably going to fly home from Poland. We want to go to Iceland, but time and money might not permit. And then before we go back home, we're going to stop in Buffalo, New York, and see her family and have a little baby shower there. And we'll fly down to Louisiana and see my family do the same thing and have a baby shower and kind of see everybody that couldn't make it to our wedding. And then we'll fly back home to California.
Sounds like an awesome trip. And so after your trip, what kind of plans do you have for 2017?
Man, that is a tough question. I wish I had an answer for you. Honestly, I don't know. We didn't expect the baby, and that's going to totally just throw everything off. My wife at this point doesn't have a job. She's just doing some freelance, like online personal training and nutrition consulting, which doesn't bring in very much money. With me being on the road right now, like I'm not really, working with any clients at the moment. So hopefully I'll figure it out in the next 2 months while we're traveling, because I have no idea. I think I'm probably going to end up getting some kind of a full-time job for a little while, because when we get back, she's going to have 2 months before she has the baby. And at that point, she really can't work much,
Absolutely.
And it wouldn't be fair for her to start a new job and then have to, take maternity leave right away. So, her and the baby are kind of going to be relying on me for the first several months when we get home. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. But the beauty of life is that you figure things out. And, we're on this trip to experience life and grow and learn and grow stronger together as a couple. And we have our eyes and ears open for opportunities and just inspiration. So hopefully we figure that out. We also, on this trip, we started a website to document our trip around the world. It's called powercouple.com, POWRCUPL.com. And we do sell t-shirts and some coffee mugs through there. So maybe, by the time we end the trip, we'll have enough following to kind of turn Power Couple into a business. But right now it's just a cool way to document our trip and our, baby growth. We had to have a couple of doctor appointments for the baby while we're traveling and stuff. So we're documenting that as well on the website and through our Instagram account and everything. But short answer to that question, I don't know.
Fair enough. So why'd you guys decide on the name Power Couple?
Yes. So I was just thinking of names for the blog, and I guess enough people had kind of referred to us as a power couple that, once I thought of that name and then kind of thought of, the trendy spelling of dropping the vowels or whatever, it just sounded catchy and it sounded like something that other people would relate to. And our tagline is "Grow Stronger Together." And we thought that was a kind of a cool way to tie it in. And really our goal is with Power Couple, in addition to documenting the trip around the world, is to inspire other couples to grow stronger together. We're both vegan. We're both really into health and fitness. Obviously, we're traveling around the world while she's pregnant. So we're hoping that, people looking at our lifestyle will be inspired, just kind of by our example. And whether that be the vegan aspect, the traveling, the, fitness, whatever it might be, we're hoping that other people will kind of see us and be inspired to grow stronger together in their relationship.
Yeah, definitely. No, that sounds like a great idea for a blog. Fat, I know we're having a little bit of connectivity issues, and I'd love to do a part 2, especially when you get back to California. But I have one last question before we start wrapping up here, and the last question is, I actually don't know what your age is. I assume you're out of your 20s, but maybe you're still in your 20s.
Sure.
But
I'm 34.
34. Okay, that's perfect then. So you still remember what it's like to be in your 20s. If you had to go back and tell your 25-year-old self, had to give him some advice, and let's make that not just for yourself, obviously, but for all the listeners here, what kind of advice would you give all the 20-somethings listening to this show?
Mm-hmm. I would say your mindset is everything. And luckily, it is something that can be shaped and formed and changed. And if your mindset is not currently one that is conducive to being successful or to being however you personally want to be, you can work towards changing that. I really started working on my mindset after a big kind of, heartbreaking breakup in my 20s. And I started reading self-help books. And one of the biggest ones for me was The Secret of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. And it not only taught me a lot about my money mindset, but also that you can change your mindset about other things. And once your mindset is set up for success, then the sky's the limit. So kind of in conjunction with that, I would also tell my younger self to invest a little bit more, a little bit earlier, because you can never invest your money too early.
So actually, let's dig in a little bit deeper to that. So if someone says, oh, that's great, I want to change my mindset, any practical tips on how they can do that?
The first thing that comes to mind is kind of directly from that book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, because the first part of that book sort of helps you to understand why you do think the way you are. So, and this is kind of paraphrasing parts of the book and stuff. So basically, when you're born, you don't know anything about money or anything about anything. So what you know and what you think at this point in your life, whatever point in your life that might be, you've gotten because of either your upbringing, what you saw, what you were exposed to, what you experienced. It's not how everybody experiences it. It's what you experienced it. So if you can understand, I think this way because I experienced this, or I went through this, or I saw this, or I didn't see this, or whatever it might be, if you can understand why you are the way you are, then you can kind of unlearn it so that you can, put better ideas, better mindsets in place.
I love it. Fat, where can people learn more about you and everything you're doing?
Sure. So you can follow my social media at FatTonyBMX. That's also my .com website if you want to check out my photography work. And right now you can check out powercouple.com and powercouple on Instagram and Facebook, so you can follow our journey around the world.
Awesome. Tony, Fat, it's hard to remember which one to call you. Fat, thank you so much for coming on this show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot. And like you said, if you want to do a part 2 with a better Wi-Fi connection when I'm not in a weird Thailand hotel, I'm up for it.
I would love that. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter. And I release a new video every Monday. And by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. Like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.